All right, welcome back. This is now lesson 27, part 2, picking up where we left off from part 1. We were factoring trinomials with a leading coefficient of 1. We've seen two methods of doing this, trial and error, or FOIL. And then the second method is called the AC method, sometimes referred to as grouping. So those are our two different methods. All right, so example 5 is where we're picking up. You can see it says take out a GCF first. Now, even if you don't see that given to you as an instruction, we should always be checking for a GCF. There hasn't been one yet in this lesson so far, but we're about to see some problems where there is a GCF, or a greatest common factor. So 18x to the third minus 21x squared minus 9x. Each of these terms has an x, and each of these numbers is a multiple of 3. So our GCF is 3x. Okay, so just a little note off to the side here, GCF, 3x. So let's take that out first. Then we'll worry about whatever's left over in the trinomial. So if we take out the 3x, let's divide each term by 3x. Let's see, 18 divided by 3 is 6. X to the third divided by x, that's now x squared. Minus 21 divided by 3 is 7. X squared divided by x is x. Minus 9x divided by 3x is just 3. All right, now we're about to do quite a bit of work here. Enough that we might forget about our GCF in the final answer, and we still need it there. So let's bring down that 3x so we don't forget about it. And then we'll focus on factoring the trinomial that's left over. So our final answer will have 3x and then something in parentheses and something else in parentheses. So let's focus on the trinomial that we have. You've now seen two different methods. You've seen trial and error. You've also seen the AC method. A lot of students tend to prefer the AC method because it's a little bit more systematic, meaning there's sort of these more structured steps, and maybe it feels more predictable and less like you're guessing. So I will do the AC method for this one. The problem after this, we're going to see sometimes when you do A times C, the number is so big that it's really not worth doing. But this one's fine. We can do it. So let's do the AC method. But I also want to say either one is fine. Okay, trial and error, totally valid. All right, but you just got to pick one. All right, so I'll do 6 times negative 3. Because now, by the way, we're focusing on what's left in red here, the 6x squared minus 7x minus 3. I already took out the GCF, so just don't worry about that. We brought it down, you can forget about it. We're only worrying about what's in the parentheses. So 6 is A, negative 3 is C. When we multiply, we get negative 18. We want factors of negative 18 that have a sum. Oop. Kind of looks like the word sum, that has a sum of that middle term, which is negative 7. All right. So go ahead and start listing those factors of negative 18. And again, I want my sum to be negative 7. Okay, so 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. Those are my factors of 18. And then I need to worry about signs for this one. If I'm going to multiply to a negative, the signs need to be different. For my sum to be negative, I need my bigger number to be negative. So I'll just go ahead and put little negative signs next to the bigger numbers here. So I have 1 and negative 18, 2 and negative 9, 3 and negative 6. The ones that will add up to negative 7 are right here. It's the 2 and negative 9. So 2 and negative 9, that multiplies to negative 18 and has a sum of negative 7. Now I get to split up my middle term. So now that I found those numbers, 2 and negative 9, I'm going to write 2x and then minus 9x. So I've taken that minus 7x and I've split it up into 2x minus 9x. 2 minus 9 is negative 7, so that is equal. Those are equivalent right there. I'm going to bring down the other terms. The 6x squared comes down. Because that 2x is positive, I need to put a plus sign. So I have 6x squared plus 2x minus 9x, and then I'll bring down the minus 3 as well. So now that I have those 4 terms, now I can go ahead and factor by grouping. My first group and my second group. My first group, 6x squared plus 2x. The GCF is 2x here. 6x squared divided by 2x. Let's see. That will be 3x. 2x divided by 2x is just 1. So I have 3x plus 1 in parentheses. Moving on to the second group, minus 9x minus 3. Okay, so that minus 9x, that's kind of a leading term in that group. Remember, if your group starts with a negative, plan on factoring out a negative. The GCF between 3 and 9 is 3, so I'll factor out a negative 3. Negative 9x divided by negative 3 will be 3x. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is positive 1. So take a look at our parentheses. They should match. Now, if you didn't factor out the negative, you'd see the signs not matching and probably get stuck or mixed up there. So just be careful. We have 2x, parentheses, 3x plus 1, close parentheses, and then minus 3, parentheses, 3x plus 1. The 3x plus 1, that's a common factor. So that's one of my factors in my answer. And then the 2x minus 3, that comes together in my last factor. So my final answer, putting it all together, we already brought down that 3x, that was the GCF at the beginning. So we have 3x, then in parentheses, 3x plus 1, and then another parentheses, 2x minus 3. So we're now at a point where we're using more than one type of factoring in some of these problems. In a way, we kind of use 3 methods, right? So we factored out a GCF. Then to factor the trinomial, we use this AC method, which then led us to factoring by grouping to finish. So lots of kinds of factoring happening all at once. All right, good. Next problem. Now we're on example 6. This is another one where we can take out a GCF first. 60q squared minus 34qw minus 70w squared. Okay, notice the 2 variables, q and w. We can't factor out either of them because none of them is in all 3 terms. But there is a GCF. Each of these numbers is divisible by 2. So let's factor out a 2 first. So our GCF is 2. Okay, 2. So 60 divided by 2 is 30. So after I take out the 2, I'm left with 30q squared minus 34 divided by 2 is 17. So 17qw is now my middle term minus 70 divided by 2 is 35w squared. Okay, so we have 2 parentheses 30q squared minus 17qw minus 35w squared. All right, I am not going to do the AC method for this problem. Let me show you why. You could. It just feels like the numbers get too big for me. So if I do A times C, that would be 30 times negative 35, which is negative 1050. So if I were to continue, I would need factors of negative 1050 that add up to negative 17. Okay, so that pair of numbers does exist. It's a little bit beyond my comfort level. And if there's another method, let's try to use that other method instead. So I'm just going to cross this out and just say too big. Not that it's impossible, but just let's try something else. So let's use trial and error. So what does that mean? Let's see. Let's go back. I know I have this 2 on the outside. Let's set up some parentheses. So remember what we're focusing on right now, now that we've already taken out the 2. We're focusing on what's in parentheses here, the trinomial 30q squared minus 17qw minus 35w squared. Okay, so I need my first two terms to multiply to 30q squared. So there's a lot of possibilities. I'm not going to start with 30q times 1q. Okay, if there's many possible factors that you could use, start with the ones that are close together. So if I were to make a list of factors of 30, I would have 1 times 30. Here, I'll make the list over here. Factors of 30. This is just for my first term, by the way. 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 5 times 6. Let's go with the ones that are closest together, 5 times 6. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in 5q times 6q. And I'm trying these because 5q times 6q multiplies to my first term, which is 30q squared. I'm not sure that those are the ones that will work, but I'm speaking from experience that usually if you have a long list like this, it's the ones that are closest together. Okay, now let's focus on the last two terms. All right, so my last two terms need to multiply to negative 35w squared. The first thing I think of when I think of factors of 35 is 5 times 7. Okay, so for my last two terms, they need to multiply to negative 35. I mean, sure, it could be 1 and 35. That's pretty unlikely though. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's going to be something with 5 and 7. Now, I know the signs need to be different. I'm not really sure which number is going to be negative or which number is going to be positive. Again, this is trial and error. We're trying something. So I'm just going to make a choice, and I'm going to try negative 5 and positive 7. I know one of them needs to be negative. I just don't know which one. All right. Now, when I fill them in, these little blue spots up here, remember about the GCF conversation before? I have 5q and then a blank space, and then 6q and a blank space. I do not want to put the minus 5 with the 5q, because then they'd have a 5 in common. And that is not the case in my original problem. There is no GCF of 5. There was a GCF of 2, and I already took that out. So in the trinomial that's left over, 30q squared minus 17qw minus 35w squared, there's no more GCF. So once again, I'm not going to create a factor where there suddenly is a GCF. So I will not be putting the 5 with the 5q. So I'll put the 5 over here with the 6q, minus 5. Oh, and by the way, this last term, remember, it's not just minus 35, it's minus 35w squared. So I guess I need to put a w with the 5. Okay, so I'm filling in one of my blanks here. In my second parentheses, I have 6q, and I just wrote minus 5w. Back to the first factor, I guess that's where I'll put the positive 7. So I'll put plus 7w. Okay, all of that work got me to my first try, my first trial. I need to now check it. All right, so let's check by distributing. So here's what I'm checking. 5q plus 7w times 6q minus 5w. So I'm checking it. Okay. 5q times 6q is 30q squared. We already knew that. 5q times minus 5w, that's minus 25 qw. Oops, sorry. And then my inside terms, 7w times 6q, that's positive 42 qw. Then my last two terms, 7w times negative 5w, that's negative 35w. So remember, we already knew that the 30 and the 35 would be all good. We really now need to check those middle terms. So when we combine our middle terms, meaning the minus 25 qw plus 42 QW, what we get is positive 17 QW. Okay. So the question is, did we get it? What we wanted is we wanted the trinomial to be 30Q squared. We wanted minus 17 QW, but instead we got plus 17 QW. And then we had minus 35W squared. We're so close. The only reason why this is not correct is because of that sign in the middle. So here's what we do. All we have to do is switch the signs in our factors. Okay, so if this happens to you, if you're trying to factor this way using trial and error, you're checking your answer, it's so close, the only thing wrong is the sign, meaning it's plus instead of minus or vice versa. All you need to do is switch the signs in your factors. So change all the pluses, or change a plus to minus, change the minus to plus. Okay, so we wanted that minus 17 QW. Instead, we got plus 17 QW. But we can just switch the plus and the minus in our factors. So remember this question mark over here. Remember how we were listing factors of negative 35, and I just made a guess of negative 5 and 7. I guess my guess was wrong. Instead of negative 5 and 7, it could be 5 and negative 7. And I didn't know. That's why it's trial and error. Nobody expects you to get it right on the first try. That's just not going to happen most times. But we're about to get it on the second try. So, and it's not even a try, we know. So let's write our final answer. We have this 2 that we're bringing down. And then our 2 factors. Remember, we're switching those signs. So instead of 5Q plus 7W, it's 5Q minus 7W. And then the second one, instead of 6Q minus 5W, it's 6Q plus 5W. And that right there is our final answer. So I found that to be more of kind of an intense problem. There are a lot of steps there. 60Q squared minus 34QW minus 70W squared. First, we took out a GCF, which was 2. Then we were left with 30Q squared minus 17QW minus 35W squared. Then we set up our 2 parentheses for our 2 binomials. In red here, those first two terms needed to multiply to 30Q squared, and we chose 5Q times 6Q. Then our last 2 terms needed to multiply to negative 35W squared. We tried positive 7 and minus 5. We checked it, we were close, but our sign was off for our middle term. So then we switched the signs, and that led us to our final answer. So instead of plus 7W, we had minus 7W. Instead of minus 5W, we had plus 5W. So our final answer was 2, and then parentheses, 5Q minus 7W, parentheses, 6Q plus 5W. All right, and if we checked it again, it would pretty much look like what we had before, only instead of minus 25 QW, we'd have a plus. Instead of plus 42 QW, we'd have a minus, and then our 17 would be negative as we wanted it. All right, so what we're getting at next is kind of like a part 3 of this lesson. All right, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. You could be done now, but these problems coming up basically come from your homework. And this is a lesson, this is a topic where it's so important and there's so much happening that I maybe went a little bit overboard with how many examples to give you here. So if you feel like you have a good handle on things, you might be good to be done at this point. If you feel more anxious and confused, stick around and let's do some more. All right, and you can always come back. Okay, here we go. So kind of part 3 where it's just, here's some more examples. All right, so we'll see a good variety here. And we'll kind of go back and forth between, we'll use the AC method sometimes, we'll use trial and error sometimes. Okay, so just some reminders, write the terms in descending order if they're not already. Factor at a GCF if possible. So number 1 in this next set, it's already in descending order and there's no GCF. I think these numbers are reasonable enough where we could do the AC method. So let's do that. So A, B, and C. So if I do A times C, that's 6 times -5, which is -30. So I need factors of -30 that have a sum of that middle number, which is -29. -29, okay. See how those numbers are so close to each other? They're literally 1 apart from each other. That's a clue that 1 is going to be one of our factors. So the factors of -30 that add up to -29 is just going to be -30 times 1. Okay, and you could make a long list, of course, but sometimes just if you think of the right answer right away, just go with that. So -30 times 1 multiplies to -30 and has that sum of -29. Okay, so now I get to split up the middle term. The -29a becomes -30a plus 1a. Okay, actually, I'm looking at my notes key here. If some of you are following along with that, I actually did it in the other order. So I wrote plus 1a and minus 30a on the key. I'm going to keep going. Maybe you can kind of compare and notice that the final answer is still the same. And the order can be either way. All right, so let's keep going. Bring down the 6a squared. Bring down the -5. Okay, so 6a squared minus 30a plus 1a minus 5. In my first group, 6a squared minus 30a, my GCF is 6a. And I'm left with a minus 5. My second group, 1a minus 5, there really is nothing in common between those two. So remember, that means you get to write a plus 1. So if you're factoring by grouping and you feel like there's no GCF, take out a 1. 1a minus 5, if I divide it by 1, I just get 1a minus 5, or a minus 5. So I have 6a parentheses a minus 5 plus 1 parentheses a minus 5. All right, so a minus 5 is that common factor. And then my outside terms that are left over, that's 6a plus 1. There we go. So again, if you're following along with the notes key that's available in Blackboard, that PDF it's basically my handwriting, you'll see this answer just written in reverse order. The 6a plus 1 was written first. Either way is fine. Both answers are correct. Okay, and depending on the order that you split up your middle term, that may affect what your final answer looks like, but both of them are correct. All right, good. So let's move on. Number 2. This one also has a GCF, or excuse me, this one does have a GCF. As soon as you see that higher exponent, get ready to factor out a variable. The GCF here is going to be 3, or sorry, wow. GCF here is going to be C. My mistake, I misspoke. Okay, so each of these terms has a C. I'm going to factor out C. And that will leave us with 20c squared minus 17c minus 63. So those numbers don't have anything in common. Those terms just had a c in common. Oh, there. Okay, I'm going to choose to do this one using trial and error. The reason is because I want you to see both methods. So I'm going to try to go back and forth. But if I did the AC method, I would be doing 20 times -63. That's just getting a little big for me. So instead, I will not be doing that. I'm going to keep the numbers separated and we'll use trial and error. Okay, so bring down the C for our final answer. All right, so let's do some trial and error here. So I'm setting up some parentheses. Remember, my first 2 terms need to multiply to 20c squared. I'm going to try 4 times 5. Remember the thing I said about if you have a bunch of choices for your factors, choose the ones that are closest together. So 20c and 1c was not a likely choice for this one. That's not to say it will never work, but I'm going to try this first. 4c times 5c. Okay, so now I have to pick numbers that multiply to -63. All right, I'm going to show my work slightly differently here. I'm not going to make a long list. I'm just going to try something. The first thing I think of that multiplies to 63 is 7 and 9. So I'm just kind of plugging them in. This is a trial, right? This is a guess. Also, I'm choosing not to fill in my signs here. Why is that? Well, I'm kind of just leaving that till the end. So this is another way you can kind of go about your trial and error. So I want you to see, here's sort of an abbreviated way of checking this answer, because this is not a complete answer yet. There's not even signs yet. But really what I need to check, it's the outside and the inside terms, right? I know that the first terms multiply to 20c squared, 4c, 5c, I got that. 7 times 9, 63. As long as I choose one positive and one negative somehow, I know that that will work for the 7 and 9 multiplying to 63. It's the -17 in the middle I really need to work on, or really need to check, I guess. So I'm going to just check the outside terms and the inside terms. So 4c times 9, that's 36c. 7 times 5c, that's 35c. Now again, I know I didn't put any signs here yet. Here's the thing, no matter what I put for my signs, no matter which one was positive or negative, 35 and 36, those will never add or subtract to -17. It's not going to happen. Okay, so it's never going to give you that sum of -17c. No matter what you try for your signs. So if that seems weird to leave the signs blank, you can just kind of try something. So maybe you prefer to just try something, maybe +7 and -9 there. Maybe that makes you feel better. So this would be -36c and then +35c. Not going to add up to -17c. So that's not going to work. And just changing the signs will not help. So no. So I'm crossing out that option. So let's do another try. So if you try something and it doesn't work and it's just really far off, what I recommend is keep your first terms as they were, try switching your last terms, and then check that. If that still doesn't work, then you can go back and play around with your first terms, but focus on the last ones as the ones that you're switching around to begin with. Okay, so I'm switching the places of the 7 and the 9. So I'm going to try 4c with 9 and then 5c with 7. Again, with the blank spaces here, I'm not plugging in some signs just yet. I want to show you how we can kind of figure out what the signs will be. Okay, so I'm making some space. Okay, actually, I guess I could have left part of that. We're about to check the outside and inside terms. Okay, so again, here's what I'm trying. 4c with 9, could be plus or minus, not sure. And then my next factor, 5c, blank space, and then 7. In the blank spaces could be plus or minus, not really sure. So let's check. Okay, and if the abbreviated check kind of confused you, maybe I'll do the full FOIL this time. 4c times 5c, that's 20c squared, which we already knew. My outside terms, 4c times 7, that's 28c. My inside terms, 9 times 5c, that's 45c. And then my last terms, there's 63. So I know that needs to be -63. Here's what I really wanted to focus on though. The outside and inside terms right here. Now I can get 28 and 45. I can get those to equal this -17c if I make the bigger number negative. So if I make the 45 negative and I make the 28 positive, this is going to work out. Okay, so positive 28 minus 45. Yes, that equals negative 17. See, and I got it. So let's work backwards now. How could I make this happen? If I wanted the 28c to be positive, where did that 28c come from? Well, it came from 4c times 7. So if I want that to be positive, I guess the 7 better be positive. And see how I want that 45c to be negative? How could I make that happen? Well, 9 times 5c, I guess I need that 9 to be negative. My inside terms right here. Okay. Now I'm showing you something that's fairly advanced. I've been doing this for longer than an hour, okay? So I've had more practice. So probably most of you, if you're brand new to factoring trinomials, some of this is gonna be a little bit beyond what you're ready for, and that's okay. Some of you have seen this before in maybe a high school algebra class. So I'm showing you some strategies. If something clicks with you, that's great. If not, that's okay. Trial and error, just keep trying. And when you get something wrong, error, then try something else. Okay, so my answer here, 4c minus 9 times 5c plus 7. Here's my check over here, 20c squared plus 28c minus 45c, and then that's going to be minus 63, because negative 9 times 7 is negative 63. Okay, and those middle terms add up to negative 17c. All is good. So my final answer, remember that c we brought down as a GCF? Forgot about it by now, so good thing we wrote it already. And then my two factors are going to be 4c minus 9 and 5c plus 7. All right. Very good. Next one. Take a break at any time. Okay, and again, the problems that are left, this is number 3, there's 3, 4, 5, and 6. I found some of the homework problems to be just a little tricky, so that's kind of where these are coming from. Speaking of which, number 3, these numbers, they just look a little big, right? Okay, so 56w squared plus 121w plus 63. Again, I'm not doing the AC method. 56 times 63, it's too big for me. So once again, trial and error. You might be surprised at how quickly you can do one of these big number problems. All right, so let's focus on the first terms. The first terms need to multiply to 56w squared. Well, the first things I'm thinking of that multiply to 56 are 7 times 8. So I'm going to try that, 7w and 8w for my first terms. And hey, look, everything's positive in this problem. Thank goodness. So let's put some plus signs. So 7w plus something times 8w plus something. All right, well, my last two terms need to multiply to 63. All right, well, I know my times tables. The first thing I think of is 7 times 9. But wait, I don't want to put the 7 with the 7w. Remember that? I don't want to create a GCF. I don't want there to be a GCF of 7 in here because there is no GCF in this original problem. So I guess I'll put the 7, instead of putting it with the 7w, I'll put it with the 8w, which means I guess the 9 will go with the 7w. So here's my first try. 7w plus 9 times 8w plus 7. Let's check. My first terms, outside, inside, and last. Okay, so 7w times 8w, 56w squared. My outside terms, 7w times 7 is 49w. Inside terms, 9 times 8, that's 72w. Last terms, 9 times 7, 63. So really what I need to check is, do these middle terms add up to the middle term in the original problem, which is 121. So if I add them together, yes, they do. 49 plus 72 is 121. So we got it. See how fast that was? All right, so you know, when you see a problem with bigger numbers like this, take it slow. You might be surprised that you can narrow it down rather quickly. Okay, so again, 7w times 8w, that's 56w squared. 7 times 9 was 63. When I did the full FOIL process, this is one of those lucky times where my outside and inside terms just worked right away. They added up to that 121. And there was no way I could see that ahead of time, okay? I'm not seeing whether it's gonna add up to 121 ahead of time. I need to check it, okay? So I'm just telling you, I'm not doing all of this in my head ahead of time. All right, good. Next problem, number 4. This is one where it's out of order. 11 plus 219x minus 20x squared. So let's rearrange and put things in descending order, highest power to lowest. So that minus 20x squared gets rewritten first, plus 219x plus 11. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second here. Okay, so we've rewritten it. Everything's in descending order. There's no GCF except there kind of is because our leading term is negative. So what we're going to do first is factor out a -1. Anytime your leading term is negative, factor out a negative. Okay, trust me, it's going to be easier to finish this problem if we factor out the -1. So let's just divide everything by -1. This is now positive 20x squared minus 219x and then minus 11. So we'll bring down that negative. That -1 will be on the outside of our problem. Then we'll work on what's on the inside. Okay, so here we go. Believe it or not, I am going to attempt the AC method here because it works surprisingly fast when I tried it earlier. So I wanted to show you 20 times -11 is -220. Now, before I make a big long list of factors of -220, let me show you. The sum that we want, that middle term, oh, should be x there, sorry. That middle term is -219. Okay, so I want factors of -220 that add up to -219. We've seen this before. If these numbers are 1 apart, 1 will be one of your factors. So my two factors are going to be -220 and 1. Okay, trial and error would have worked fine as well. I mean, it's just, the numbers are kind of unpleasant regardless, but I wanted to show you maybe how quickly we could do it. So our factors of -220 that add up to -219 would just be -220 and 1. So knowing that, I can actually proceed using the AC method using grouping now. So I'll take these two numbers. They do add up to -219, which means I can split up that middle term into -220x plus 1x. Or you can just write plus x, but I like writing the 1 if we're in the middle of a problem. Okay, so the 20x squared comes down, minus 220x plus 1x, and then minus 11. With those 4 terms now, we're going to factor by grouping. Let's look at our first group, 20x squared minus 220x. So 20x can be factored out. If you go to your calculator and divide, 220 divided by 20, it's going to be 11. So I'm left with x minus 11. And then coming over here to my second group, 1x minus 11, the GCF is just 1. So we'll write plus 1. And then once again, we're left with x minus 11. All right. And finally, in our final answer, we have that -1 that we already brought down. Sometimes people just write a minus sign outside, but you can write a -1, same thing. And then x minus 11 is one of our factors, as well as 20x plus 1. So again, the final answer here is -1, x minus 11, 20x plus 1. Okay, good. Number 5, here's another one with a negative GCF. So all 3 terms have a V factor and the leading term is negative. So let's factor out negative V. So the GCF here will be negative V. All right, here's what's left over. Positive 6v squared minus 11v minus 35. Okay, now we could do the AC method. That would be fine. Getting just a little big for me to do that. So I am going to choose to do trial and error. And when I say a little big, I just mean 6 times negative 35 is beyond what I can do in my head. And so it makes me think I'll have trouble making the list of factors that I would need. So I'm just going to do trial and error. So here we go. My first two terms would need to multiply to 6v squared. So I'm going to try 2v and 3v. My last two terms need to multiply to negative 35. So factors of 35, I'm going to try 5 and 7. If I check by doing FOIL, or just sort of an abbreviated version of FOIL, my outside and inside terms, 2v times 7 is 14v, 5 times 3v is 15v. Regardless of signs, this is not going to ever equal negative 11v, that middle term that we're looking for. So that will not work. So I'm going to try something else. So good try, but no. So let's try something else. All right. Oh, and you know what I should have done is maybe brought down the negative v. I'll just write it again. Okay, so if that didn't work, let's leave the 2v and the 3v where they were. Let's just switch the 5 and the 7. So I'll put 7 first and then 5. So I'm going to try 2v with the 7 and then 3v with the 5. This time if I FOIL, if I do my outside and inside terms, my outside terms, 2v times 5 would be 10v. 7 times 3v would be 21v. Oh, okay. So these numbers have a difference of 11. How could I get them to add up to negative 11v, right? That's what we want right here. We want negative 11v. Okay, so I need the bigger number to be negative. So I need that 21 to be negative and then the 10 to be positive. So working backwards, how can we get that to happen? How do we get this positive 10? Well, 2v times positive 5, that would give you positive 10. And then how could we get that negative 21v? Well, it came from 7 times 3v, so I just need to make that 7 negative. If the working backwards thing is confusing, just try something. And if it doesn't work, try the other thing. So just make a guess. One has to be positive, one negative. If you guess incorrectly, then try again. Okay, so my final answer, I have this negative v on the outside, and then 2v minus 7, 3v plus 5 will be my final answer. And again, it's because when I FOIL, 2v times 3v, 6v squared, positive 10v minus 21v, that gives me that negative 11v in the middle that we needed, and then of course the negative 35 as well. Okay, so there we are with our final answer, and we're going to do one more problem. Okay, number 6. I'm looking at it looking for a GCF. I saw the higher exponent and I was ready to factor something out, some kind of factor of r, but that last term doesn't have an r. There's actually no GCF here. Okay, so there is a higher degree. That's okay, we've seen that before. What I mean by a higher degree is this exponent at the beginning is higher than 2. So the problem is 6r to the 6th plus 35r to the 3rd minus 49. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just do trial and error again. My first two terms need to multiply to 6r to the 6th. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and try 2 times 3. So 2 times 3, but this time, since the exponents are higher here, I need these powers of r to multiply to r to the 6th. So I'm going to cut that 6 in half and write r to the third for each one. So 2r to the third, 3r to the third. Okay, now my last two terms need to multiply to 49. Negative 49, I guess. Well, factors of 49, let's try 7 and 7. Okay, now I've been leaving these blank spaces before. I'll go ahead and just make a guess about my signs. We'll try a plus and a minus. So here's my guess. I'm trying 2r to the third plus 7, and then 3r to the third minus 7. Let's check it. Okay, check. So FOIL, let's see, my first terms would be 6r to the 6th, that's good. Outside terms, 2r to the third times minus 7 is minus 14r to the third. My inside terms would be plus 21r to the third, and then finally minus 49, sorry. All right, so did we get it? Let's see. I almost thought we did. If they were both positive, it would work, but they're not. Negative 14 plus 21, that's 7. So my middle term is 7r to the third. What I really wanted it to be is 35r to the third. So even switching signs is not going to work here. And switching a negative 7 with a positive 7, I mean, that's the same thing as switching signs. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the 7s where they are. And then this time I'm going to switch my first terms. Oh no, but that's still not going to work. All right, hang on. Let's think about this. If I switch the 3 and the 2, I mean, that's really the same thing as switching the 7s. Sorry about this. You're hearing my thought process in real time here. So welcome to the confusion. Okay, so this didn't work. Normally what I do next is switch these two numbers, the 7 with the negative 7. But the thing is, that's just going to change the signs. It's only going to result in a different sign of my middle term. This 7r to the third would just be negative instead of positive. What I really want is, I need that to suddenly be 35. So rather than just switching places, I need an entirely new set of first terms. So besides 2 times 3, what else multiplies to 6? Well, how about 6 and 1? So I'm going to try 6r to the third and 1r to the third. Okay. Sometimes we forget about that because I told you usually it's the factors that are closer together, except sometimes it's not. So let's give this a try. All right, so I'm going to check this one. So I have 6r to the third plus 7 and r to the third minus 7. So we're checking. Here we go. So we get 6r to the 6th minus 42r to the third plus 7r to the third and then minus 49. Okay. Did we get it? Let's combine those middle terms. Negative 42 plus 7 is negative 35 r to the third. Oh, so close. Okay, so we wanted it to be positive 35. Instead, we got negative. That's okay though. Remember, if you're just off by the signs, all you need to do is switch your signs for your final answer. Here we go. Okay, now I think we're ready for our final answer. So again, I'm just switching the signs. I'm so close, leaving the numbers as they are, but just changing the signs. So instead of 6r to the third plus 7, I'm now going to write 6r to the third minus 7. And then for my second factor, instead of r to the third minus 7, now I'm writing r to the third plus 7. All right. Good. Okay, this is a big lesson. There's a lot of topics that we do in this class. This, if I had to pick one thing, which please don't just learn one thing from this class, but if I had to pick one topic that you really, really worked hard at, this would be it. Factoring trinomials, okay? I'm telling you, with any other algebra or even trig or calculus class that comes later, you will absolutely be so much better off if you can come into that class feeling confident about being able to factor trinomials. Now, you probably don't feel confident now. You probably feel tired out by this extra long lesson. So take breaks, be patient with yourself. Please, please ask for help. Okay, so take advantage of that Ask My Instructor feature on MyLabs Plus. Let me know what method you prefer or what method you're trying. When you get to MyLabs Plus, the examples, it kind of goes back and forth between showing you an example with trial and error or showing you an example with the AC method. Either one is fine. It's really up to you which one you use for each problem, but please ask for help. Yes, it's really hard. It's not just you. There's a lot going on here, but it's worth practicing, and I promise that you'll get better at it. Okay, I'm going to end my speech here. So thanks for sticking with me, and please stay in touch and ask questions, and I'll see everybody in our next class meeting. Thank you.